The laughter began before the ceremony had even ended. It echoed through the immense marble chamber of the Galactic Council, bouncing off towering pillars of crystal and glowing alien sigils. Representatives from hundreds of civilizations filled the circular hall, their eyes, antennae, and sensory tendrils all fixed on the center platform. And on the center platform stood a human. Daniel Hayes shifted uncomfortably under the weight of 1,000 alien gazes. He had been a simple engineer on a remote diplomatic station only 3 months earlier. Now he stood in the most powerful political chamber in the galaxy. And apparently he had just inherited a princess. The council's laughter grew louder. Daniel clenched his jaw. "Is this some kind of joke?" hissed a tall insectoid ambassador from the Vree Dominion. Another delegate, a gelatinous being floating inside a grav field, rippled with amusement. "The human doesn't even understand what he's received." "Oh, he understands," another voice said mockingly. "He inherited her." A few more snickers followed. Daniel glanced sideways at the figure standing beside him. Princess Arisera, the daughter of King Thalrex of Zorith, one of the most powerful rulers in the Outer Spiral, and, according to half the galaxy, the ugliest princess ever born. Zorathians were known for their beauty. Tall, radiant beings with luminous skin and elegant features that many species considered almost divine. Their royal bloodline was legendary. But Princess Arisera had been born different. Her skin was darker than most Zorathians, patterned with strange silver lines. One of her eyes glowed a faint violet instead of gold. Her horns curved asymmetrically. To her own people, those features were considered deformities. To Daniel, she looked extraordinary. But the council clearly didn't share that opinion. "Explain this nonsense," demanded the Vree ambassador. At the center of the platform stood the royal executor, an ancient Zorathian named Valem. His voice carried through the hall. "By the final decree of King Thalrex, his daughter Princess Arisera, and all titles connected to her are granted to the human Daniel Hayes." The room erupted again. Why give her to a human? Because no Zorathian wanted her. Even pirates refused the alliance. More laughter. Daniel felt heat rising in his chest. But Arisera remained perfectly still. She didn't react, didn't defend herself, didn't even look at the council. Her expression was calm, almost resigned. Daniel leaned slightly toward her. "Are you okay?" he whispered. For the first time, she turned her head. Her mismatched eyes met his. "You do not have to pretend kindness, human," she said quietly. "This arrangement is humiliating enough." Daniel frowned. "I'm not pretending." She studied him, clearly unconvinced. "Every species laughs at me," she continued. "It is tradition." The council was still murmuring. One reptilian delegate raised a claw. "Executor Valem, surely the king's decree had some logic behind it. Why would he bind his daughter to a random human engineer?" Valem folded his hands behind his back. "Because King Thalrex understood something the rest of you do not." Silence slowly fell across the chamber. "What exactly is that?" someone asked. Valem smiled faintly. "That the princess was never the disgrace you believed her to be." The council scoffed. "Oh, please. We've seen her. A political liability at best." Daniel felt his patience cracking. Before he could stop himself, he stepped forward. "Maybe you're all wrong." A wave of confused murmurs spread through the chamber. The Vree ambassador leaned forward. "Excuse me, human?" Daniel gestured toward Arisera. "You call her ugly, like that's some universal fact. But where I come from, people look different. A lot different." "So," someone snapped. "So maybe your definition of beauty isn't the only one that exists." The council went quiet. A few delegates looked defended. Others looked amused. But Arisera looked stunned. No one had ever said something like that in the council chamber. The Vree ambassador laughed. How noble of you, human. More chuckles followed. But that doesn't change reality. Daniel crossed his arms. Reality is subjective. Beauty standards vary across cultures. Even on Earth we argue about it constantly. He glanced at Sarah again. And, honestly, I think she looks pretty amazing. The silence this time was absolute. Several council members blinked in confusion. One ambassador whispered to another. Did the human just compliment her? Arisara's eyes widened slightly. You what? Daniel shrugged. Your markings are cool. Your eyes are unique. And those horns look like something out of a myth. The council looked baffled. They weren't used to humans. And clearly humans had strange tastes. But the laughter slowly returned. Oh, the human has poor standards. Or terrible eyesight. Perhaps both. Daniel ignored them. He turned fully toward Sarah. I mean it. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she asked quietly, Why? Why what? Why defend me? Daniel scratched the back of his head. Because they're being jerks. The council chamber erupted again. But something had changed. The laughter sounded thinner. Because for the first time, someone had stood beside the princess instead of mocking her. And that someone was the most unexpected person in the galaxy. A human. The ceremony ended quickly after that. Daniel and Sarah were escorted out of the council chamber through a long corridor of glowing stone. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. You realize what you've done? Daniel shrugged. Defended someone who needed it? You challenged half the Galactic Council. He thought about it. Yeah, that might have been a bad career move. For the first time, a small smile appeared on her face. Humans are strange. So I've been told. They reached a balcony overlooking the endless city of Zorith Prime. Floating ships moved through golden clouds. Massive towers pierced the sky. Sarah rested her hands on the railing. My father believed humans were different, she said softly. Daniel leaned beside her. Different how? He believed humans saw beyond appearances. Daniel chuckled. Well, not always. Humans can be shallow too. But sometimes we surprise ourselves. She looked at him. My father arranged this inheritance before his death. You mean he planned this whole thing? Yes. Daniel stared at the city. So, he basically forced a random human engineer to marry a galactic princess. Yes. That's bold. Sarah nodded slowly. He believed it would prove something. What? That the galaxy's idea of perfection was flawed. Daniel grinned slightly. Your dad sounds like a smart guy. But the real shock came the next day. Daniel was summoned back to the council chamber. This time the mood was different. No laughter. No mockery. Just tension. The Vree ambassador spoke first. We have reviewed the late king's final sealed decree. Daniel folded his arms. And it appears Princess Sarah inherited more than a title. Valem stepped forward again. Under Zorathian royal law, whoever accepts the princess also inherits her command. Daniel blinked. Command of what? Valem's smile returned. The Zorathian defense fleet. The council erupted in shocked whispers. One of the largest military forces in the galaxy. Thousands of warships. Millions of soldiers. And now, it belonged to Daniel. The human. The Vree ambassador looked furious. This is absurd. A human cannot control Zoratha's fleet. Valem remained calm. The law is clear. Another delegate spoke. Then we challenge his claim. Daniel raised an eyebrow. On what grounds? Competence. Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. If the human fails a strategic evaluation, the inheritance can be revoked. Daniel glanced at Sarah. She looked worried. He leaned toward her. Quick question. Yes. Do you know anything about space battles? A little. Good. Daniel turned back to the council. Fine. You want a test? Let's do it. The simulation chamber activated. A massive holographic battlefield appeared around them. Enemy fleets, asteroid fields, strategic objectives. Daniel studied it carefully. Then he smiled. Sarah noticed. Why are you smiling? Because this looks familiar. What do you mean? Daniel pointed at the hologram. This is basically a strategy game. The council stared. A what? Daniel shrugged. Humans play stuff like this all the time. He stepped forward. All right, let's save the galaxy. What followed stunned everyone. Daniel moved ships in unexpected patterns, used asteroids as cover, baited enemy fleets into traps. Within minutes, the simulated enemy armada collapsed. The system declared victory. The chamber went silent. One council member whispered, "Did the human just win?" Another checked the data. He completed the simulation faster than any admiral in recorded history. Daniel stretched casually. Turns out wasting thousands of hours on strategy games was useful after all. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. You defeated one of the council's hardest battle simulations. Yeah. You're not surprised? He shrugged. Humans love impossible challenges. The Vree ambassador looked pale. The council could no longer challenge Daniel's claim. The inheritance was valid. The human now commanded the Zorathian fleet and stood beside the princess everyone had mocked. Valem addressed the chamber. Perhaps the late king understood the galaxy better than we did. The council had no answer. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council had been proven wrong. Later that evening, Daniel and Sarah stood on the palace balcony again. The fleet's ships glowed like stars in orbit. Sarah spoke quietly. The council no longer laughs. Daniel smiled. Good. You changed everything. Nah. I just played a video game. She looked at him with something new in her eyes. Respect. Daniel. Yeah. Do you still believe I am beautiful? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Honestly, yes. I think the galaxy just has terrible taste. For the first time in her life, Princess Sarah laughed. And somewhere in the vast halls of the palace, the spirit of King Thalrex would have been smiling, because the galaxy had mocked his daughter. But in the end, the only person who truly saw her worth was the one species no one had expected, a human.